For much of the post-decolonization era, authoritarian rule has dominated a significant portion of Africa. Many of these rulers, initially endorsed by their people, eventually became oppressive figures, betraying the trust of those they pledged to serve. Recent years have witnessed a series of revolts across different African regions, resulting in coups, but none were as notable as the Arab Spring uprising in North Africa, which led to the downfall of Muammar Gaddafi, often referred to as the Great Gaddafi. What began as protests against injustice and dire economic conditions quickly evolved into a collective discontent with dictatorship and the absence of democracy. But he may not have been all that bad. Muammar Gaddafi, born in 1942 in Sirte, Libya, was a prominent and controversial figure on the world stage. He rose to power through a military coup in 1969, overthrowing King Idris. Gaddafi's background was rooted in humble beginnings. He was born into a Bedouin family, a historically nomadic Arab group. His early life was marked by tribal influences, and he went on to receive a military education at the Libyan Military Academy. Gaddafi's leadership, spanning over 4 decades, was characterized by a blend of revolutionary ideology, political repression, and international conflicts. He presented himself as a champion of Arab nationalism and Pan-Africanism, advocating for self-reliance and anti-imperialism. Gaddafi's unconventional style and flamboyant attire often garnered attention on the global stage. Gaddafi, who clung to power for more than 30 years, ruled Libya with an iron fist, displaying anti-democratic tendencies, political repression, and involvement in acts of terrorism. His regime was marked by various conflicts, including a prolonged feud with the United States and links to acts of terrorism, notably the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, which painted him as an international adversary. Yet, one aspect seldom discussed was Gaddafi's unique political system called Jamahiriyya, which aimed to establish a form of direct democracy through political and social reforms. Under his leadership, Libya nationalized its oil industry and pursued an independent foreign policy that often clashed with Western interests. While these were commendable developments, they did not necessarily equate to the democracy they purported to represent. Contrary to the prevailing narrative, Libya under Gaddafi was not as dire as the world has been led to believe. Under his rule, Libya experienced significant social and economic changes. Gaddafi initiated various development projects and implemented policies aimed at improving education and healthcare, which led to notable improvements in literacy rates and life expectancy. He also nationalized key industries, including oil, to distribute wealth among the population. While citizens lacked the opportunity to vote, Gaddafi ensured they enjoyed an elevated standard of living to compensate for the lack of political freedoms. Whether this was sufficient remains a subject of debate. However, the fact remains that Libya was a relatively prosperous place under Gaddafi's rule, even though the same cannot be said for its current state. Surprisingly, no African nation has yet surpassed that record. During Muammar Gaddafi's rule in Libya, citizens enjoyed several benefits, including significant improvements in various aspects of their lives. It is safe to say that under Gaddafi's leadership, education was a top priority. Literacy rates improved dramatically. In 1969, the literacy rate in Libya was around 10%. By 2011, it had surged to approximately 90%. This was accomplished through extensive investment in education, including the establishment of universities and free education at all levels. The country also had a robust healthcare system, and the life expectancy of its citizens increased significantly. In 1969, the life expectancy was around 51 years. By 2011, it had risen to approximately 75 years. Its economy saw substantial growth under Gaddafi's rule. The gross domestic product per capita increased significantly. In 1969, it was around $60. By 2011, it had soared to over $14,000, largely due to the nationalization of the oil industry, which allowed more wealth to be distributed among the population. Gaddafi implemented various subsidies to benefit the population. Basic necessities like food, fuel, and housing was heavily subsidized. This made these essentials affordable for the majority of Libyans. The government initiated housing projects that provided affordable housing to citizens. As a result, homelessness was nearly eradicated and housing conditions improved. Gasoline was remarkably inexpensive at 14 cents per liter. In 2011, a UK-based provider of insurance products, Stavely Head, compiled a list of countries with the lowest gasoline prices globally, with Libya ranking third at just 14 cents. Employment opportunities increased significantly. 6 out of 10 Libyans were gainfully employed. The government was the largest employer, and public sector jobs were accessible to many. The unemployment rate was relatively low compared to many other countries in the region. Gaddafi's government invested in agriculture, with substantial irrigation projects. This investment aimed to increase food production and reduce dependence on imports. As a result, Libya experienced growth in agricultural output, especially for the initiation of the Great Man-Made River Project, one of the most extensive irrigation projects in the world. It aimed to transport water from underground aquifers to urban and agricultural areas, providing a reliable source of fresh water for the population. Libyans had enough food, with undernourishment at under 5% and a daily calorie intake of 3,144, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. Remarkably, Libya had no foreign debt and held reserves of over $150 billion, most of which are now frozen worldwide. This was in stark contrast to many nations, including the self-proclaimed champions of democracy and capitalism, such as the USA, which had a debt exceeding $18 trillion. Libya, on the other hand, had none. Redistributing wealth was a key aspect of his rule, although it was hard to overlook the fact that his own family was amassing significant riches from oil revenues and various deals. This wealth redistribution seemed more like a tactic to secure loyalty rather than a genuine effort to promote equality. The eventual fall of Tripoli marked a turning point, and Gaddafi went into hiding, persistently asserting that his people were still loyal and promising victory against the occupiers and collaborators. His dictatorial regime had finally crumbled, but there were concerns that he might remain at large, orchestrating an insurgency. Gaddafi met his ignominious and gruesome end when National Transitional Council forces found him hiding in a tunnel following a NATO airstrike on his convoy as he attempted to escape from his last stronghold, the city of Sirte, where his rule had all begun. A full 9 years following Muammar Gaddafi's overthrow, Libya is still grappling with violent conflict and the arduous task of establishing state institutions. The situation has been exacerbated by external actors who have funneled both money and weapons to proxies prioritizing personal interests over the well-being of the Libyan populace. Despite United Nations efforts to facilitate a lasting peace, they've been overshadowed by competing peace conferences, each backed by different foreign governments. There's this delicate balance between being charismatic and just coming off as plain obnoxious. Leaders, at the end of the day, should be all about serving their people, not feeding their own egos. When you look at Gaddafi's rule, it's like a textbook example of what to do and at the same time what absolutely not to do if you want your leadership legacy to be successful and respected. If you found this video insightful, do well to hit that like and subscribe button right underneath the new tourist channel so you keep getting first-hand information and get more contents like this on underrated stories in history. Thanks for watching and see you in our next video.